All right, so again, this is the second week of us jumping back into this series. And what we talked about was the fact that the reason we came up with that title is, in sports analogies, if you have an awful defense, you are not going to win games because the other team's offense is going to rack up the points. And so in the same way, when culture asks us challenging questions about our faith and wants to know the answers, and we have no answer to give because we've just said, well, that's what my parents told me so, then the reality is that your faith is not going to be as strong as what we would desire for you to have. And so we're going to start answering some of those challenging questions here now. And so tonight, what we're going to do is take the next step. So last week, we talked about proving the Bible's authenticity, that the Bible is actually truth, and that it's not just some fairy tale that came up thousands of years ago and now we just say that it's truth, but that it actually is real. And then tonight, what we're going to do is now so we've determined, okay, the Bible is true, so let's jump right into the very beginning, proving that there is a creator of all things in the universe. And so that's what we're going to be doing tonight, and we're going to answer this first question. Did God really create the world? Did God really create the universe? And so the way we're going to do this is, as you can see on your note sheets, first I got presented to you the claim that somebody might ask you or say, a statement that they think is truth. Then what we're going to do is we're going to finish that and actually show what does the Bible say is truth to that response, okay? So tonight's first claim that we have is that a creator making the world does not make sense when we can see that the universe was made by a Big Bang. Okay, so what is the Big Bang Theory? So a theory in astronomy, basically, and this is like the dictionary version of it, the universe originated billions of years ago in rapid expansion from a single point of nearly infinite energy and density. Okay, so basically the Big Bang theorists try to explain the reason that everything is here today, because really, in millions of years ago, there was one moment where tiny particles, light, and energy came together and expanded, and it continues to make up all that we see around us today. Okay, so that's their claim. And the proof for this that they try to stand behind is particularly in two major things. First is the Hubble telescope. So are you guys familiar with the Hubble telescope? You know, that's what we can look far out into the universe, be able to look at different stars, galaxies, and whatever. And in 1920, what they started to say was that there was this relationship between galaxies' distance from Earth and its speed. And so they started to notice this, and so basically what they said is that the universe is expanding rapidly, okay? The further away the universe or star is from us, the faster that they're moving from us. So the closer something is to us, the slower it looks like it's going, and then the further out you look into the universe and you see these stars, the quicker that they're going away. And they use this data to approximate how old the Earth is. And so what they did is they said, even though it doesn't show necessarily how or the why the universe came into existence, merely it tries to approximate the age of the universe. So that's it for the first thing. They're saying, okay, it's billions of years ago because we can look at how fast things are traveling away from where we are. Second discovery was in the 1960s, so about 40 years later. And what they said is that they saw this stuff called cosmic microwave radiation, background radiation, okay? Which is basically, they believe that there's this leftover heat radiation in the universe from the Big Bang. And then this theory is based on basically a presumption. So can they necessarily prove exactly that it was from a Big Bang? No. But they presume that all of this radiation that's out there is from the Big Bang. And so then they'll determine that this is truth, that you are basically to believe that all this radiation came from the Big Bang, and that's proving that the Big Bang is real. Now there's intelligent design. Intelligent design is basically arguments used to demonstrate that living organisms were created in more or less their present forms by an intelligent designer. Okay? So what they're saying is that it didn't just happen out of nothing, but you actually look at it and you go, look around you, there has to have been a creator. But what I want to make a note of, and this is going to be important because we're going to kind of jump between the three groups, okay? Intelligent design does not necessarily mean Christian. What it merely means is that they believe that there is a better explanation than things just magically happening through evolution. But they don't necessarily always hold to the fact that it is God of the Bible who created all things. So that's a big difference between intelligent design and creationism. So creationism takes it the next step further, and they said, yes, look at the world around you, and you're going to determine the fact that there's so many precise details that have to happen that it can't just come out of existence of nothing. But there is an intelligent designer, and that intelligent designer is from the Bible, and it's the God of the Bible. And he's the one that brought it all about. And so creationism uses arguments from intelligent design. So sometimes they will say like, okay, look at what intelligent design has said, and we hold to these truths because we can see these scientifically proven in either on the earth or in the universe. So for example, a creationist would say in Genesis 1, okay, so God creates earth, right? 6 days it says, and then on the seventh day he rested. And so a creationist would look at that and they would say basically, God created the earth in 6 literal days, 24-hour days. Sometimes maybe a intelligent design theorist would actually say like, yes, God created it in 6 days, but each day was about a 1,000-year period. And so then, therefore, in 6,000 years, everything was created. So they can sometimes take these other approaches, whereas a creationist would say that what you read in the Bible is the truth, not necessarily just theory. So, what are the proofs that they use? Well, the big one that they're using right now is the cosmological argument, okay? And what this basically says, again, some of your eyes are like, whoa, okay, what are you talking about right now? All right, so stay with me on this because we're going to go on to all these in-depth things, but then I'm going to bring it together, okay? I'm going to make it make sense. So here's what it basically says. If something has a beginning, it could not have popped into being out of nothing, but must have had a cause that brings it into existence. So basically, they break this down in 3 ways. First, their argument starts with them saying everything that begins to exist has a cause, okay? So when they would look at the beginning of the creation period, they would say there is a cause to why creation started. It didn't happen out of nothing. Then, once they prove that, they would say, okay, the universe began to exist, okay? So, which you'd kind of go, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I can see the universe around me, so it exists. Then they would take it to the final step of this, and they would say, okay, if the universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. So there is someone who has created the universe. Now, creationists would look at that and say, you know what, we agree with that. Yet we want to take it one step further. It has a cause, and that cause is the God of the Bible. And so that's how they would take that argument to the one step further. Now, there's the evidence that both intelligent design and creationists would use from the astronomy perspective. They would say that our exact location in the universe is extremely important to a creator making it. Why is that? Okay, how many of you know that like the exact spot we are from the sun is really important? What happens if we get too close to the sun? Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be that much close. Like the earth doesn't have to be that much closer for us to burn up, right? Okay, what happens if we're too far from the sun? Yeah, the whole earth would just turn into this frozen ball of wasteland, and we would not be able to survive on it. Okay? Now, what would happen if you're on a different galaxy? Ever heard of supernovas? Okay? Supernovas are these big balls of gases, much hotter than what we've ever experienced here on Earth. And basically, if we had Earth placed anywhere near one of these supernovas in a different galaxy, as soon as those would happen, we would just be extinct. It would be gone. And then, what about in our own galaxy? What if we were in a different spot of the spiral of the Milky Way galaxy? Well, a lot of astronomers would look at it and say that actually there's a whole bunch of what we always say shooting stars, but there's a whole bunch of comets that come by, and that actually they would be large enough to penetrate through our outer defense of our atmosphere and actually hit the Earth, and they would kill us because we just have these constantly hitting the Earth. So what they look at all of this and they say, where we are in this Milky Way galaxy proves the fact that there is an intelligent designer who is God, because he knows that this is the exact location that Earth needs to be in order for mankind to be able to live on Earth. And so they use all of these different things to show the proof that it's not just merely by chance. It's not that there was an expansion of gas and all of a sudden we came to be, but actually God created it. And yet the evolutionists would take the view that all of these precise details of Earth are merely a chance from a large explosion. And so honestly, what I feel like this shows us is that a divine God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe. And again, there's so many more proofs we could go over tonight, and I don't have time to go through all of them. But honestly, I want you guys to dig into these because there's so much that proves to why God is the creator of the universe. And so a divine God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe. But what someone might ask you then is, if God is the best explanation of a universe's creation, then how can you prove this if it's not scientific? So they might phrase it a little bit differently and say creationism is not based on a scientific theory. So first off, we need to understand what a secular scientist assumes a scientific theory to be. So how would they define this? Well, according to the MANH, they say a scientific theory, a theory is basically a well-substantiated explanation of an aspect of the natural world that can incorporate laws, hypotheses, and facts. And so basically, a scientific theory is something that can be able to be tested and then help them draw conclusions about certain things in our world. And so their claim is that the intelligent design, creationism, all of those different beliefs are not able to be tested and drawn conclusions that the universe is made and did not merely come out of nothing. So that's their claim. So does this mean that intelligent design, creationism cannot be tested? Well, if you, again, asked an evolutionist, they would say, absolutely, you can't test it. And yet creationists would argue the exact opposite of that. They would say creationism is based on scientific design. And what's often misunderstood or honestly downright ignored is the fact that scientific theory that an evolutionist would point towards, okay, we look at this animal, it's maybe had small mutations, therefore then it's now evolution taking place. A creationist is using that same exact scientific theory and coming from a fully different perspective of it and saying, no, it's not proving evolution right now, it's proving creationism. And so they're using the exact same scientific data from a different perspective to show a different conclusion. And so their stuff is based on scientific theory. And yet this begs the question then, how can one trust creationism if it's a religion and it's not science? Right? So a lot of times when you hear someone talk about evolution versus creation, they'll say, okay, the reality is you're coming from a religious standpoint, but I'm coming from a scientific standpoint. And our culture is so defined on the fact that it has to be scientific in order to be believable. And so an evolutionist might say this: evolution is science, and intelligent design and creationism are religions. And yet what I want you to hear tonight is that this claim is totally wrong. And I'm going to present this in a different way than maybe you've heard it, because evolution, I honestly believe, intelligent design and creationism are all religions. Not exactly what you're going to hear in school. But why do I say that? Because religion has multiple definitions. And I'm going to even take Merriam-Webster's dictionary, okay? You know, like what you Google and it always comes up through that of a definition, okay? They had 3 different sets of what religion actually is defined as. First, they say it's a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices, okay? Secondly, they say it's the service and worship of a god or the supernatural. But then third, and this is where I'm coming from, is a cause, principle, or system of beliefs held to with ardor, which is basically passion, and faith. So just like intelligent design and creationism, evolution also holds to the systems and principles with passion and faith. And why do I say that? Well, first, evolution can only test what we have today. Okay, so take an example of a bone-like structure we have from archaeology, okay? Do they literally have that animal living, breathing that they can see? Do they? No. So can they replicate a version of what that animal looks like exactly? No. So it's not 100%. They can maybe look at it and kind of go, okay, well, this bone density is thicker here and it's thinner here, so therefore we can kind of structure it here and there. But sometimes it's crazy when you even look at some of the animals that they claim as like the monkeys that became humans, they don't even have the full bone structures of them. And yet they claim it as 100% truth. And the reality is it's not. It's them taking bits of things that they believe to be true from back in the day, but they weren't there in that moment to see those animals living, breathing, and moving across the earth. And so they're in faith believing something to be true. And so the second thing, though, is the scientific theory is constantly being adjusted. So, for example, use the idea of the earth is flat. Okay? Okay? So the reality is that was the commonly believed truth, is that the earth is flat. And that if you sailed far enough into the distance, eventually someday you would fall off the face of the earth because it's flat. And yet we would say that was a scientific theory that they had. But what did we find out? Eventually we started sailing and it was like, oh wow, we're not actually falling off the edge of the earth. The earth must be round. And so they had to come to a conclusion that their scientific theory was not correct. And so they adjusted it and now said, our new scientific theory is that the earth is round. Right? So it's constantly being changed. Their truths are being changed all the time. And I love, this is from the book The Lie, Evolution by Ken Ham. He says it this way: models of science are subject to change for both creationists and evolutionists. Okay, so that is true. For a creationist, sometimes our models are changing because we're learning new things as well. But the beliefs that these models are built on are not. The problem is that most scientists do not realize that is the belief or religion of evolution that is the basis for scientific models. The interpretations, the stories, just like I said, like we start to create stories of T-Rexes, Tyrannosaurs, all of those different like dinosaurs. And they're used to attempt an explanation of the present. And then he goes on and he says, evolutionists are not prepared to change their actual belief that all life can be explained by a natural process and that no God is involved or even needed. And so what he's basically saying here is the fact that evolution is a religion, that they are basing with passion, with faith, in something that they don't have full comprehension of. And yet, in culture, they promote it as 100% true because it's backed in science. And yet it's also backed in religion. And so both are playing off of faith. And so the main reason that evolutionists, honestly, I believe, do not want to hold to a creation like that God created the universe, the reason they don't want to believe that is that having a creator, a God of the universe, means you're accountable to something. If you say that God created the universe and he calls you to live to certain standards, now you're supposed to live to those standards. If you say that the universe just happened out of nothing and that you don't have a purpose in life and so you can do whatever you want, to them it sounds pretty good. It's like I can honestly have no regret on anything in life because I have no moral code for life. And so honestly, that's why I believe that the evolution perspective continues, is because people sometimes say, I want to live how I want to live, and I don't want to have a moral code. And so the question then, why would anybody want to hold creationism if they could live a life with no accountability? Well, honestly, because I think God created mankind and creation with intentionality and purpose. See, all things in creation were made in Genesis in 6 days. And God's statement, time after time, when he finished creating a part of his creation, he finished it with a statement over and over. And he said, and it was good. But then there was something extraordinary that God finished off creation with. And this is where we get into the end of Genesis chapter 1. And it says, Genesis 1:27 through 28, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, all the animals that scurry along the ground. Why do I think that that's so important? I think it's important in a couple different ways. First, God emphasized the fact at the end of making mankind, it wasn't good. It was very good. And why is this important? Because the reality is that God had now created all of creation in an especially unique way, ready for his mankind to come into it. That everything had been set into place perfectly for mankind to exist. God knew the exact distance that the sun needed to be from the earth. God knew the exact place that the earth needed to be put into the Milky Way galaxy in order for man to exist. God knew all of these things as he was creating each individual part to get ready for his humankind to arrive. But he didn't end there. Then God designed a world in mind for you specifically too. He knew each one of you even before you would show up on earth. And he designed a world where you would be blown away by aspects of it and go, I can't help but see this and believe that there is God. For me, like I said earlier, I see the mountains, I get to the top of one of those, and for me, that's my moment when I say, God is real. And I'm sure for each one of you, you could have something where you would say, God is real because of this. This proves to me that God is a master designer. And so he has you in mind, but then he's also giving you a specific calling in life. And I think that this is something that's overlooked in the fact of evolution. And what's really sad to me is that if you just came from a blob of goo back in the day that just evolved to now, you have no purpose in this life. You could literally exist and end, and there was no meaning to it. And yet, when you look at God being the creator and giving you a specific calling to do, you now have purpose in your life. And so he says, again in Genesis 1, to be fruitful, to multiply, to govern the world. He's saying, go, look at the world, be able to learn how to build things, look at how to be able to work, and look at how to be able to multiply the next generation to come and also see the creation that I've made. And to ultimately bring glory to me, not because I need worship, but because I want you to experience it with relationship with me. And this kind of leads me to my final one, is that God created you to enter a special and unique relationship with him. And so when God says man was created in the image of him, he's not saying that you're an exact design, like it's not like you're God all of a sudden. But now you have been created in a special way, unlike any other part of creation, so that ultimately you can have a unique relationship with God, unlike any other aspect of creation. That you actually get to have a deep, close relationship with God. And that's a special thing to look at, even like Adam and Eve, when they were created in the image of God, that they all of a sudden now had this special, unique relationship with him because of that, because of being made in the image of him. So what do you do with it? How do you take what we've heard tonight and not just merely have a better head knowledge of creation versus evolution, but ultimately be able to live it out in your life? First, I think it's reflecting. Reflecting on the amazing gift of creation that God's placed you in. And what I want to challenge each one of you to do is this week to take a moment to slow down and look at what God's created. There have been moments where I remember like laying down in the grass and like just all of a sudden like starting to like look at the grass and then realizing like you've got grass, then you've got these cool like dirt particles that you can start to see, and all of a sudden you start seeing like ants and different like things going through it, and like, okay, some of you would get creeped out by that, but for me in that moment, I like kind of looked at it and I'm going, wow, like there's these other little worlds that we don't even notice, and we walk over them day to day and we start to just see it as normal, and yet God created all of these things for us to enjoy and experience. And so what I want you guys to do this week is to reflect, to pause, to stop what you're doing, and to go, how is God trying to show me his creation so that I'll bring praise to him? How does he want me to see him differently this week? And then secondly, to not just do that, but then to reconnect with God by responding to him in praise for the things that he's done and is doing. And so this is the next step. You can realize the fact that God has created some incredible things and then said, oh, that's cool, and move on. It's another thing, though, to be able to look at creation and say, okay, God, you've created some amazing things, and now I'm stopping what I'm doing, and I want to acknowledge that you are an awesome God, that you are worthy of being praised, that you are worthy of being followed after. And that is why I think it's important for us to slow down and to reflect. And then to finally reproduce the love that God has for us to others. And here's the reality, like, there are so many people that look at the world through an evolutionary perspective, that they don't have purpose, that they're not designed intentionally, that the world today, they can live however they want, and it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there's nothing in the future good for them. You die and that's it. You go back into matter out in the universe and energy. But the reality is for you carry something different in you. Because you say, you know what, my life matters now, and then when I die, I have a world that's set aside for me even better than the one here. And that I now get to live in such a way to experience that someday. And you get to call people into that. And that's an incredible thing that you have that's different than what others have. And so it's not you learning this stuff to bash people down and say, well, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're wrong. But ultimately to say, no, look at it from this perspective and see that you are loved, you're designed intentionally, and you have a future. That's the point of learning these things, is to show that amazing truth. Because ultimately the reality is that creation does point to God as the creator. God is the answer to why things started. And you have the power to be able to share that to the next person, to the next generation. Let's pray. God, I thank you for tonight. There's a lot of stuff that we can't cover in the amount of time that we have tonight, but I just ask that this would start to intrigue these students in such a way that they would want to do more research and to look at it from a perspective where they see their life as intentionally designed by you. God, I ask that they would hear this tonight and that they would be able to walk away from this and see ways in which you have created the universe for them, and that they would take moments of reconnecting with you through praising you. And God, I ask that then ultimately they would go out and they would show others the creation that you've made. And so, God, I thank you for tonight, this opportunity for me to just unpack that with them, and I ask that it would do really cool things this week for each one of them. So I pray this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.